Hello everyone and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is episode 11 of the Maxwell Files. What's going on, everybody? So, as you're all aware, I'm sure, Ghislaine Maxwell was denied bail today by Judge Allison Nathan. I was listening in on the conference call, and the prosecution team, led by Allison Moe, was on their game. They absolutely crushed Cohen and Company today in this bail hearing. They provided ample amounts of evidence that painted Ghislaine Maxwell as a super big-time flight risk, and they were able to make it resonate with the court. And that's the biggest deal, right? Because if you can prove that somebody is a flight risk and they have the ability to skip out on bail, skip out on justice, well, it's going to be really hard for a judge to provide the person who is being accused with bail. And the defense team, they cited all these different cases today. Cohen talked about cases like Madoff and Khashoggi and tried to use those as precedent for Ghislaine Maxwell getting bail. But the prosecution countered with the Jeffrey Epstein case, saying that if Epstein didn't get bail and he's not even a foreign citizen, then why should Ghislaine Maxwell be given bail? We also heard from two of the survivors, one in a letter form from Jane Doe, who expressed her desire to see Ghislaine Maxwell stay in custody. And secondly, we heard from Annie Farmer, who addressed the court and laid it all out on the line, why Ghislaine Maxwell should not be given bail. And the federal government and Judge Allison Nathan decided that Ghislaine Maxwell and the defense did not bring enough to the table for her to get bail in this situation. She didn't have the proper ties to the community. She didn't bring enough of a bond proposal, the co-signer situation, using land in a foreign country as collateral. It was just, it looked like an absolute dumpster fire, if you want my honest opinion, on behalf of her defense team. They should have been prepared for all of that. They should have, if they were not ready to provide the people who were going to co-sign the bond, they should have tried to get this extended out. But instead, they thought that they were going to finesse it and use, of course, stuff like the COVID pandemic, et cetera, in their favor. But the judge, to her credit, was not having it. She closed the door on that nonsense, and Ghislaine Maxwell will be spending the remainder of her life, hopefully, behind bars. And that's exactly where she belongs. Unless you listen to somebody like Geraldo Rivera, who thinks that Ghislaine Maxwell has got railroaded somehow in this situation. My question is, what does Ghislaine Maxwell and Geraldo Rivera have in common? Are they friendly? Was Geraldo at any of those parties with Ghislaine over at Jeffrey Epstein's house? I just have some questions. Why is he so ardently defending her, when it is obvious to everybody paying attention that this woman should be behind bars? There is no bail package that could have been presented that would have made it a sweet deal for the federal government to provide her with bail. And people were talking about this prior to the hearing today, and a lot of people were saying, oh, she's going to get bail, she's going to get bailed out, the judge is going to make sure she leaves, COVID. And me personally, I always thought that she was going to end up in prison for the rest of her life. These aren't the same prosecutors who went after Epstein the first time around, folks. And with all of the pressure and the spotlight on this case, you have to believe that the prosecution is going to have their ducks in a row. And if it's any indication moving forward of how the prosecution is going to handle themselves in the courtroom against against Ghislaine Maxwell's defense team, well, the federal government is in a good position because Allison Moe laid waste to them today. I mean, absolutely laid waste to Cohen. Now, Everdahl was not there. He wasn't present for the hearing as far as making statements or whatever. So I'm guessing that Cohen is going to be in charge of the trial portion of this case. Not positive. Could be somebody else. But it looks like, at the very least, right now, Cohen is stepping into that role. And if I was scoring this fight as a judge would score, this hearing as a judge would score a fight in an MMA match, this is most certainly a 10-8 round for the survivors and for the federal government. Ghislaine Maxwell was completely slapped down here. The COVID pandemic wasn't enough. The fact that she is so-called, quote-unquote, not violent wasn't enough. The statute of limitations wasn't enough. And the draconian non-prosecution agreement that so many people like to bring up was not enough to keep this vile, bipedal serpent away from prison. The party's over for her. The party is now over for Ghislaine Maxwell. There is no wiggling your way off of this hook. All there is in her future, a jail cell, prison bars, a goofy-looking jumpsuit, and absolutely horrendous food. Today's article that we're going to read is from the New York Post, and it's a bit of a recap about what happened today at the trial. And according to this article, Ghislaine Maxwell cried as she was held without bail. Obviously, I wasn't privy to the video footage. I was listening in on the phone call portion of the conference. But the fact that this lady cried when she got remanded to custody, it brings me great joy. I know, we shouldn't get joy out of other people's suffering. But if anybody deserves to sit in a prison cell, it is Ghislaine Maxwell. This article is from the New York Post, and the headline is, Ghislaine Maxwell cries as she's held without bail on Epstein-related sex charges. The authors of this article are Leah Usta... Oh boy, I can't pronounce this last name. I'm sorry, Leah. I am about to mangle your last name. Ustachewicz and Reuven Fenton. Ghislaine Maxwell cried as she was ordered held without bail Tuesday, with a Manhattan judge ruling the accused sex abuser poses substantial actual risk of flight after she purposely hid from authorities. Boy, isn't that music to our ears? That they're actually calling her now a sex abuser in these articles as opposed to a socialite or a Jeffrey Epstein's madam. How long have we been correcting that sort of vernacular? The 58-year-old British socialite, there it is again, it rears its ugly head. The 58-year-old British socialite, co-conspirator, co-abuser, general scuzzbag, and pal of late convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein wiped tears from her left eye several times using the back of her left index finger as federal judge Allison Nathan refused to free her from the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn until her trial next year. So think about that. This bipedal serpent who ran around preying on all of these girls for so long and acted in a bubble where she was completely and utterly protected from any sort of scrutiny or criminal liability for decades. Now, she is rotting in a jail cell. Now, in the year 2020, the predator has become the prey. No combination of conditions could ensure that Maxwell wouldn't try to flee prosecution, Nathan said during a video conference in Manhattan Federal Court, where Maxwell appeared on the feed remotely from a closet-sized room at the jail. God, I am so glad to see that this woman, who is so full of cockiness and arrogance and hubris, has been brought down to earth and knocked out of her orbit. The risks are simply too great, the judge said, adding that Maxwell has exhibited an extraordinary capacity to evade detection. I've said that from the very beginning. This lady is very, very deft when it comes to spycraft. She knows how to play this game. She wasn't the madam. She wasn't just somebody that showed up and fell in love with Jeffrey Epstein and in turn fell for his trap and was part of some sort of victimization process. Hell no. She was the predator. She was preying. And her and Jeffrey Epstein just happened to be fellow travelers. So the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell tried to play the victim card here and tried to act like she wasn't involved in this from the jump is just laughable to anybody who has been following this. And it's good to see that the court agrees. Maxwell, the daughter of disgraced late newspaper baron Robert Maxwell, briefly hung her head when it became clear that she wasn't going to be released at all, much less to a luxury New York City hotel as she had requested until trial. And that was another thing that I found hilarious on the conference. When they talked about how she put forward the plan that she stays in some luxurious New York City hotel while the trial was, while we were awaiting for the trial to happen, was just a little look inside of her psyche. She truly thought that she was going to walk out of this courtroom today. She thought that she was going back to the laps of luxury to open the mini bar and toss a few back. That's what she thought. And why wouldn't she? For years, her and the rest of her friends have been protected by these same very courts. But now, the shoe is most assuredly on the other foot, and it is aimed directly at the ass of all of these co-conspirators. Dressed in an olive brown crewneck top with her hair pulled back, Maxwell occasionally sipped from a white styrofoam cup and fidgeted in her seat during the proceeding. Yeah, it's starting to dawn on her now, okay? It is dawning on her that she is not walking out of this courtroom. She is not going to be a free woman. And the reality of the situation is, at her age, and with the charges she is currently staring down the face at, and with more on the way after other co-conspirators are brought in my opinion, she finally understands the gravity of the situation, and she knows that she will never, ever take another breath of fresh air. She faces charges that she conspired with Epstein to sexually abuse young women. In siding with prosecutors, Nathan said there were no conditions of bail that could ensure Maxwell's return to court, noting her significant financial resources, foreign connections, and efforts to secretly move around the country following Epstein's arrest last year. And these are all things that I've talked about previously as to why I didn't think that she was going to get bail. When you add all of this stuff up, what you're looking at is a complete flight risk. There is no court in the land that is going to give this lady bail. I don't care about the fit Geraldo throws. I don't care about the precedent that is being pointed out by the defense team. This lady, who is a citizen of France, by the way, with no extradition law, would have found her way out of this country now that she truly understood the gravity of what she faced. And I think that Judge Nathan explained that perfectly. And that went into her decision, according to her as well. And I thought that that was a very good strategy to take because it's the truth. You cannot let somebody like this out of jail when they have these sorts of resources, enough money to walk onto a property and buy it for $1 million. Oh, well, travel's hard because of COVID-19. Look, we all know money talks, and we all know that these bipedal serpents are all helping each other still. So if you think Ghislaine Maxwell has no friends left, you would be wrong, because obviously somebody or some sort of entity has been helping her hide this whole entire time. Earlier in the more than 2-hour procedure, Maxwell pleaded not guilty to a 6-count indictment that could land her up to 35 years behind bars. Long accused of serving as Epstein's madam, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, all-around scumbag, Maxwell was arrested July 2nd on 6 counts: conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. 2 counts include perjury for allegedly lying during a 2016 deposition in an Epstein-related case. And now all of those charges of conspiracy to entice a minor, enticement of a minor to travel, conspiracy to transport minors with intent, transportation of a minor with intent to engage, all of this stuff are RICO predicates. And the second co-conspirators are charged, this is going to get slapped with RICO. I am sure of it now. Obviously, I have nothing to back that up but my opinion. And yeah, you could take my opinion and $1.50 to the coffee joint and get yourself some coffee, right? But in my opinion, what this is explaining here, especially with these charges, this is RICO predicate, because obviously if it's a RICO case and a conspiracy, it has to be 2 or more participants involved in the alleged crimes. So right now, the only person that's on the chopping block here is Ghislaine Maxwell. So the second we see a co-conspirator named and indicted, we will see how broad the scope of this case truly becomes. Prosecutors contend she was hiding at a mansion on a 156-acre lot in a remote part of New Hampshire in order to avoid being detected by authorities. Noting her 3 passports and net wealth of $10 million, they said she had every incentive to flee the United States. And about that $10 million net wealth, we know it's more than that, and the prosecutors were pointing that out today as well. In fact, the prosecutors said her finances are very opaque, and they have no idea how much money she truly has. And that's the proper answer, because we have no idea how much she benefited from the money laundering scheme that her and Jeffrey Epstein were also involved in. 2 of Maxwell and Epstein's survivors also implored the judge to remand Maxwell, including a Jane Doe who said she received a call in the middle of the night threatening the life of her 2-year-old. And that sounds like par for the course. We already know what Maria has been on record saying about Ghislaine Maxwell and threats. We know what Virginia has said. So why would we think that Ghislaine Maxwell or the people around her are above threatening Jane Doe or Jane's daughter? She was in charge. She egged him on, Doe said in a statement read out loud by prosecutors. That's very important too. Whenever you see somebody framing this as Ghislaine Maxwell as some sort of victim, refer back to what these girls are saying. Refer back to what Jane Doe is saying here, what the other girls have said throughout the case. Ghislaine Maxwell was a key component and was in a leadership role. Annie Farmer, another Epstein survivor, was on the line to tell the judge she was recruited by Maxwell when she was 16 and sexually abused by Maxwell and Epstein at his New Mexico ranch. Again, we see that there is an investigation running parallel to this one in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, if you're the New Mexican authorities and you see what's transpiring here, don't you also open up a case and bring charges? Look, let's throw the book at these people. Let's make sure people in the future understand that while we might turn our cheek and our heads the other way for your thievery and your grifting and your lying, we will not sit back and allow you to abuse children and women so brazenly. We will not allow you to get away with these cheap, disgusting, garbage plea deals. Those days are over. And those of us who were not paying attention previously, well, you probably shouldn't have locked us in our houses for 3 or 4 months, because you have our attention now. She is a sexual predator who groomed and abused me, Farmer said. She has never shown any remorse for her heinous crimes. And for Annie, I'm very happy that Annie had a chance to face her today and speak her piece, because what Annie has been through is absolutely despicable, deplorable, and disgusting. And for her finally to have her chance to confront Maxwell after all of these years, we got to chalk that one up in the victory column. And moving forward, I hope that all of the survivors get their chance to do the same exact thing. Maxwell's lawyers called for her release on a $5 million bond and home confinement. It's just not realistic, defense lawyer Mark Cohen said about keeping Maxwell incarcerated amid the coronavirus pandemic until her trial, which was scheduled for next July. But one of her accusers, Jennifer Arose, said in a statement after the no bail ruling, I am once again able to take another breath as Ghislaine Maxwell will be in jail until at least her trial date next July. Knowing that she is incarcerated for the foreseeable future allows me and my fellow survivors to have faith that we are on the right path. And again, folks, look, you know if you've been listening to this podcast that I am as skeptical of the federal government as anybody. And as far as the FBI goes, you know my feelings when it comes to the FBI. But we have to call a spade a spade. And I've said it a few weeks ago before Maxwell got arrested that there were some rumblings in the case and that things were about to take a turn and that we would see some arrests. And I think we're seeing that now. And I think it's a pretty common theme amongst the survivors that have come forward and spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell being arrested. And now after the bail hearing today, a common theme is they're starting to feel like the wheel of justice is starting to turn. And I think that's a huge deal because these are real people we're talking about here. They're just not people in an article. These are real people who had dreams and hopes and aspirations all crushed under heel by these people. And now, maybe it's a few decades later in some cases, but now the shoe is on the other foot. The narrative has been snatched back. And it's time for the survivors to go on the offensive. And that's what we're seeing here. And we're also seeing a prosecution team led by Allison Moe that obviously has done their homework and who is looking for the knockout blow. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. Inside of the description box, you will find a link to our GoFundMe account if you would like to help out the podcast, and also a link to this article for you to check that out as well. All right, everybody, I'll be back in a little bit with the Daily Drop.